The Pearl, Chapter 3, page 59. That is true, said Kino. But how can we know? We are here, we're not there. As they walked up toward the city, the crowd grew behind them, and Juan Tomas, in pure nervousness, went on speaking. Before you were born, Kino, the old ones thought of a way to get more money for their pearls. They thought it would be better if they had an agent who took all their pearls to the capital and sold them there and kept only his share of the profit. Kino nodded his head. I know, he said. It was a good thought. And so they got such a man, said Juan Tomas, and they pooled the pearls and they started him off, and he was never heard of again, and the pearls were lost. Then they got another man and they started him off, and he was never heard of again. And so they gave the whole thing up and went back to the old way. I know, said Kino. I've heard our father tell of it. It was a good idea, but it was against religion, and the father made that very clear. So the religion he speaks of, he's about to throw Catholicism under the bus again because the father is the priest. But the religion he's talking of is poor people should know their role in life. And you don't got try to change the game of the moneyed people. You know your role. You hand that pearl over and you take what scrap I'm willing to give you and you be happy with it and go back to your poor village and be poor and eat corn tortillas and beans every day. But you need to know your role, boy. It's like that. Against religion, and the father made that very clear. The loss of the pearl was a punishment visited on those who tried to leave their station. And the father made it clear that each man and woman is like a soldier sent by God to guard some part of the castle of the universe. And some are the ramparts, and some far deep in the darkness of the walls. But each one must remain faithful to his post and must not go running about, else the castle is in danger from the assaults of hell. Know your role. Stay in your lane, poor person. And not only poor, indigenous native Mexican person. I have heard him make that sermon, said Juan Tomas. He makes it every year. The brothers, as they walked along, squinted their eyes a little, as they and their grandfathers and their great-grandfathers had done for 400 years, since first the strangers came with arguments and authority and gunpowder to back up both. So what happened 400 years ago? The year is 1619, and the first African slaves land in Virginia. Not only did slaves land, so did their European colonizers to steal all the land and take the resources from the indigenous natives, not just in America, in Mexico too, and all of North and South America.
Mexico and the West Indies too. The West Indies had it real bad, like the Caribbean.
And the Caribbean islands, yes. The whole world, basically. They colonized all of Africa, they colonized Pakistan, India, parts of China, Indonesia, Australia, New Zealand, everywhere. And in the 400 years, Kino's people had learned only one defense, a slight slitting of the eyes and a slight tightening of the lips and a retirement. Nothing could break down this wall, and they could remain whole within the wall. The gathering procession was solemn, for they sensed the importance of this day, and any children who showed a tendency to scuffle, to scream, to cry out, to steal hats, and rumple hair were hissed to silence by their elders. So important was this day that an old man came to see, riding on the stalwart shoulders of his nephew. The procession left the brush huts and entered the stone and plaster city, where the streets were a little wider, and there were narrow pavements beside the buildings. And as before, the beggars joined them as they passed the church. The grocers looked out at them as they went by. The little saloons lost their customers, and the owners closed up shop and went along. And the sun beat down on the streets of the city, and even tiny stones threw shadows on the ground. The news of the approach of the procession ran ahead of it, and in their little dark offices, the pearl buyers stiffened and grew alert. They got out papers so that they could be at work when Kino appeared, and they put their pearls in their desks. For it is not good to let an inferior pearl be seen beside a beauty. And word of the loveliness of Kino's pearl had come to them, The pearl buyers' offices were clustered together in one narrow street, and they were barred at the windows, and wooden slats cut out the light so that only a soft gloom entered the offices. A stout, slow man sat in an office waiting. His face was fatherly and benign. Benign, good, malignant, bad. So that's what they call like tumors. Oh, I have a tumor, but it's benign, so good. I mean, they still take it out, but it's not. Malignant would be cancerous. And his eyes twinkled with friendship. He was a caller of good mornings, a ceremonious shaker of hands, a jolly man who knew all jokes and yet who hovered close to sadness. For in the midst of a laugh, he could remember the death of your aunt, and his eyes could become wet with sorrow for your loss. So he's a phony. This morning, he'd placed a flower in a vase on his desk, a single scarlet hibiscus, and the vase sat beside the black velvet-lined pearl tray in front of him. He was shaved close to the blue roots of his beard, and his hands were clean and his nails polished. His door stood open to the morning, and he hummed under his breath while his right hand practiced legerdemain. He rolled a coin. I never knew that when people roll a coin or the poker chip is called legerdemain. Never knew that until this book. Did you?
I did not. I always thought that was just kind of a cool trick and it didn't really have
It is. And I always thought like there's kids that like can spin their pen and catch it.
Yeah.
I've never been able to do it.
I've never been able to do it.
But I don't know if you ever tried to roll a coin on your fingers, but I've seen guys like playing blackjack in Vegas, and they are intense dudes, and like they don't want to talk to you. But I had no idea it was called legerdemain.
Also, I bet gambling in Vegas right now is probably amazing just because everybody has to wear masks and nobody has a poker face.
Oh yeah. He rolled the coin back and forth over his knuckles and made it appear and disappear, made it spin and sparkle. The coin winked into sight and as quickly slipped out of sight, and the man did not even watch his own performance. The fingers did it all mechanically, precisely, while the man hummed to himself and peered out the door. Then he heard the tramp of feet of the approaching crowd, and the fingers of his right hand worked faster and faster until, as the figure of Kino filled the doorway, the coin flashed and disappeared. "Good morning, my friend," the stout man said. "What can I do for you?" So he's playing it like, "Oh, I've never heard, what are you doing here?" Kino stared into the dimness of the little office, for his eyes were squeezed from the outside glare, but the buyer's eyes had become as steady and cruel and unwinking as a hawk's eyes, while the rest of his face smiled in greeting, and secretly behind his desk his right hand practiced with the coin. "I have a pearl," said Kino, and Juan Tomas stood beside him and snorted a little at the understatement. The neighbors peered around the doorway, and a line of little boys clambered on the window bars and looked through. Several little boys on their hands and knees watched the scene around Kino's legs. "You have a pearl?" the dealer said. "Sometimes a man brings in a dozen. Well, let us see your pearl. We will value it and give you the best price." And his fingers worked furiously with the coin. Now Kino instinctively knew his own dramatic effects. Slowly he brought out the leather bag, slowly took from it the soft and dirty piece of deerskin, and then he let the great pearl roll into the black velvet tray. And instantly his eyes went to the buyer's face. But there was no sign, no movement. The face did not change, but the secret hand behind the desk missed in its precision. The coin stumbled over a knuckle and slipped silently into the dealer's lap, and the fingers behind the desk curled into a fist. When the right hand came out of hiding, the forefinger touched the great pearl, rolled it on the black velvet. Thumb and forefinger picked it up and brought it near to the dealer's eyes and twirled it in the air. Kino held his breath, and the neighbors held their breath, and the whispering went back through the crowd. "He's inspecting it. No price has been mentioned yet. They have not come to a price?" Now the dealer's hand had become a personality. The hand tossed the great pearl back to the tray. The forefinger poked and insulted it, and on the dealer's face there came a sad and contemptuous smile. "I am sorry, my friend," he said, and his shoulders rose a little to indicate that the misfortune was no fault of his. It is a pearl of great value," Kino said. The dealer's fingers spurned the pearl so that it bounced and rebounded softly from the sides of the velvet tray. "You have heard of fool's gold," the dealer said. "This pearl is like fool's gold. It is too large. Who would buy it? There's no market for such things. It is a curiosity only. I am sorry. You thought it was a thing of value, and it is only a curiosity. Now Kino's face was perplexed and worried. It is a pearl of the world, he cried. No one has ever seen such a pearl. On the contrary, said the dealer, it is large and clumsy. As a curiosity, it has interest. Some museum might perhaps take it to place in a collection of seashells. I can give you, say, 1,000 pesos. So what is that, 50 bucks? $50?
Wait, $50 back then.
Yeah, you're not sending your kid to school and getting a house and stuff. Kino's face grew dark and dangerous. It is worth 50,000, he said. You know it. You want to cheat me. And the dealer heard a little grumble go through the crowd as they heard his price, and the dealer felt a little tremor of fear. Do not blame me, he said quickly. I am only an appraiser. Ask the others. Go to their offices and show your pearl, or better let them come here so that you can see there's no collusion. Boy, so collusion is like conspiracy. Like, no collusion, whoa! Like, so basically, liars always tell you what they're lying about, don't they? Or if they don't tell you what they're lying about, they blame the lie on the opposite person. Like, look at Trump. They stole the election. They stole. Boy, he called. And when his servant looked through the rear door, boy, go to such a one, and such another one, and such a third one. Ask them to step in here, and do not tell them why. Just say that I will be pleased to see them. And his right hand went behind the desk and pulled another coin from his pocket, and the coin rolled back and forth over his knuckles. Kino's neighbors whispered together. They'd been afraid of something like this. The pearl was large, but it had a strange color. They had been suspicious of it from the start. After all, 1,000 pesos was not to be thrown away. It was comparative wealth to a man who was not wealthy. And suppose Kino took 1,000 pesos. Only yesterday he had nothing. But Kino had grown tight and hard. He felt the creeping of fate, the circling of wolves, the hover of vultures. He felt the evil coagulating about him, and he was helpless to protect himself. He heard the ears, the evil music, and on the black velvet, the great pearl glistened so that the dealer could not keep his eyes from it. The crowd in the doorway wavered and broke and let the 3 pearl dealers through. The crowd was silent now, fearing to miss a word, to fail to see a gesture or an expression. Kino was silent and watchful. He felt a little tugging at his back, and he turned and looked in Juana's eyes. And when he looked away, he had renewed strength. The dealers did not glance at one another, nor at the pearl. The man behind the desk said, I have put the value on this pearl. The owner here does not think it fair. I will ask you to examine this thing, and make an offer. Notice, he said to Kino, I have not mentioned what I have offered. So he's just spinning this web, dude. The first dealer, dry and stringy, seemed now to see the pearl for the first time. He took it up, rolled it quickly between thumb and forefinger, and then cast it contemptuously back into the tray. Do not include me in this discussion, he said dryly. I will make no offer at all. I do not want it. This is not a pearl. It is a monstrosity. His thin lips curled. Now the second dealer, a little man with a shy, soft voice, took up the pearl and he examined it carefully. He took a glass from his pocket and inspected it under magnification. Then he laughed softly. Better pearls are made of paste. I know these things. This is soft and chalky. It would lose its color and die in a few months. Look! He offered the glass to Kino, showed him how to use it, and Kino, who had never seen a pearl's surface magnified, was shocked at the strange-looking surface. The third dealer took the pearl from Kino's hands. One of my clients likes such things. I will offer 500 pesos, and perhaps I can sell it to my client for 600. Kino reached quickly and snatched the pearl from his hand. He wrapped it in the deerskin and thrust it inside his shirt. The man behind the desk said, I am a fool, I know, but my first offer stands. I still offer 1,000. What are you doing? He said, as Kino thrust the pearl out of sight. I am cheated, Kino cried fiercely. My pearl is not for sale here. I will go, perhaps even to the capital. Now the dealers glanced quickly at one another. They knew they had played too hard. They knew they would be disciplined for their failure, and the man at the desk said quickly, I might go to 1,500. So they will be disciplined. They're not the bosses. They work for the boss, and they're going to get in trouble now for not pulling this trigger. But Kino was pushing his way through the crowd. The hum of talk came to him dimly. His rage blood pounded in his ears, and he burst through and strode away. Juana followed, trotting after him. When the evening came, the neighbors in the brush houses sat eating their corn cakes and beans, and they discussed the great theme of the morning. They did not know it seemed a fine pearl to them, but they had never seen such a pearl before. And surely the dealers knew more about the value of pearls than they. And mark this, they said, those dealers did not discuss these things. Each of the three knew the pearl was valueless. But suppose they had arranged it before collusion. If that is so, then all of us have been cheated all of our lives. And not just them, their dads, their grandpas, their great-grandpas, their great-great-grandpas, their great-great-great-grandpas. Kino is blowing this religion up right now. Perhaps some argued, perhaps it would have been better if Kino took the 1,500 pesos. That is a great deal of money, more than he's ever seen. Maybe Kino's being a pig-headed fool. Suppose he should really go to the capital and find no buyer for his pearl. He would never live that down. And now, said other fearful ones, now that he had defied them, those buyers will not want to deal with him at all. Maybe Kino has cut off his own head and destroyed himself. And others said, Kino's a brave man and a fierce man. He is right. From his courage, we may all profit. These were proud of Kino. In his house, Kino squatted on a sleeping mat, brooding. He had buried his pearl under a stone of the fire hole in his house, and he stared at the woven tools of his sleeping mat until the cross design danced in his head. He had lost one world and had not gained another. And Kino was afraid. Never in his life had he been far from home. He was afraid of strangers and of strange places. He was terrified of that monster of strangeness they called the capital. It lay over the water and through the mountains over 1,000 miles, and every strange, terrible mile was frightening. Kino had lost his old world, and he must clamber on to a new one, for his dream of the future was real and never to be destroyed. And he had said, I will go, and that made a real thing too, to determine to go and say it was to be halfway there. Juana watched him while he buried his pearl, and she watched him while she cleaned Coyotito and nursed him, and Juana made the corn cakes for supper. Juan Tomas came in and squatted down beside Kino and remained silent for a long time, until at last Kino demanded, what else could I do? They are cheats. Juan Tomas nodded gravely. He was the elder, and Kino looked to him for wisdom. It is hard to know. We do know that we are cheated from birth to the overcharge on our coffins, but we survive. You have defied not the pearl buyers, but the whole structure, the whole way of life, and I'm afraid for you. What have I to fear but starvation? Kino asked. But Juan Tomas shook his head slowly. That we must all fear. But suppose you are correct. Suppose your pearl is of great value. Do you think then the game is over? What do you mean? I don't know, said Juan Tomas. But I'm afraid for you. It is new ground you are walking on. You do not know the way. I will go. I will go soon. Yes, Juan Tomas agreed. That you must do. But I wonder if you will find it any different in the capital. Here you have friends, and me, your brother. There you will have no one. What can I do? Some deep outrage is here. My son must have a chance. That is what they are striking at. My friends will protect me. Only so long as they are not in danger or discomfort from it, said Juan Tomas. He arose, saying, Go with God. And Kino said, Go with God, and did not even look up, for the words had a strange chill in them. Long after Juan Tomas had gone, Kino sat brooding on his sleeping mat. A lethargy had settled on him. Lethargic, lazy lethargy, and a little gray hopelessness. Every road seemed blocked against him. In his head, he heard only the dark music of the enemy. His senses were burningly alive, but his mind went back to the deep participation with all things, the gift he had from his people. He heard every little sound of the gathering night, the sleepy complaint of settling birds, the love agony of cats, the strike and withdrawal of little waves on the beach, and the simple hiss of distance, and he could smell the sharp odor of exposed kelp from the receding tide. Beautiful writing. The little flare of the twig fire made the design on his sleeping mat jump before his entranced eyes. Lana watched him with worry, but she knew him, and she knew she could help him best by being silent and by being near. Oh, I'm going to have to photocopy that and give it to Barb. And as though, thank you, she too could hear the song of evil, she fought it, singing softly the melody of the family, of the safety and warmth of the wholeness of the family. She held Coyotitu in her arms and sang the song to him to keep the evil out, and her voice was brave against the threat of dark music.